There is a version of you that you still haven't met. A version so composed, so precise, and so brutally consistent that if you crossed paths with him today, you wouldn't recognize him. You might even fear him. So ask yourself this: why haven't you met that version yet? Is it because you're not prepared, or because you're still clinging to the weaker one? The one who hits snooze, the one who needs applause to stay committed, the one who collapses the moment life becomes uncomfortable. You say you want change, but your behavior still bows to comfort. You speak about purpose, yet chase distractions as if they'll rescue you. That version of you, the one that unsettles you, isn't a fantasy. It's what remains when excuses are burned away, when emotional chaos is buried, when the lies you've told yourself about timing and motivation are stripped bare. Stoicism doesn't soothe you, it dismantles you. It forces you to stand alone in front of your reflection and ask, am I who I say I am, or am I still acting? The Stoics understood this. Virtue is action, not intention. Freedom is not gifted, it's earned through self-mastery. If you're still here, watching this, then something inside you is ready to cut through illusion, not for applause, not for validation, but because you're finished living beneath what you're capable of. It always begins quietly. No announcement, no dramatic shift, just the silent death of something that once controlled you. At first, you hardly notice it. That inner voice, the one that used to ask how you felt, whether you were tired, whether today was convenient, it starts losing power. You stop arguing with it. You stop negotiating. You don't entertain its excuses or delay its demands with promises of tomorrow. You move. The alarm goes off. You rise. The schedule shows up. You execute, not with frustration, not with resistance, but with a calm, almost emotionless certainty. That's where transformation actually starts. Because most people are still bargaining with themselves, still checking their mood before honoring their word. They're trapped in endless negotiations, trying to exchange comfort for progress, searching for a version of discipline that doesn't sting. When negotiation ends, you enter a world most people never notice. They can't see what changed, but they feel it. You don't react the same way. You don't flinch under pressure. You don't explain your decisions. And this new version of you unsettles people because it's clean, clear, and direct. It leaves no space for their projections, their doubts, or their need to believe you're still playing small alongside them. When you stop asking permission, especially from the weaker parts of yourself, you step outside the predictable patterns that trap most lives. You're no longer driven by what feels good in the moment. You're guided by something deeper: duty, clarity, purpose. There's a quiet violence in that, not toward others, but toward the parts of you that once kept you captive. The voice that said, wait. The voice that said, be realistic. The voice that said, you've done enough for today. Each time you act without negotiation, you drive distance between who you were and who you're becoming. That distance grows. The old urges weaken. The habits starve. First they scream, then they whisper, then they fade. And that silence matters, because it's the moment you realize you no longer belong to impulse or doubt. You belong to your word. That's what separates those who rise from those who repeat the same cycle. Most people think freedom is doing whatever they want, but as Epictetus said, no one is free who isn't master of themselves. Discipline isn't a cage, it's the blade that cuts through confusion and reveals clarity. You don't act because you feel like it, you act because this is who you are now, and that identity is unshakable, not built on emotion but on principle, on repetition, on consistency forged in silence, not shouted for attention. That's the irony most people miss. They think discipline looks like suffering, like restriction, but living inside it feels like relief. No debate in the morning, no guilt at night, no emotional crash between failure and regret. Only movement, steady, clean, focused. And people start to notice. You didn't announce anything, you didn't post proof, yet your presence speaks louder than your past ever did. It's in how you carry yourself, how you move through noise without reacting, how you keep showing up long after others quit. That's what makes you intimidating, not cruel, but confronting, because your discipline forces others to face their own excuses. You stopped waiting for the right mood, not because you became robotic, but because you became deliberate. And that difference between action driven by clarity and action driven by emotion is the difference between building something that lasts and falling back into chaos. This is why you begin small, because killing the negotiator inside you isn't a single moment, it's a process. You don't argue with distractions, you outlast them. You don't plead with your mind to cooperate, you train it like a muscle, and every day you do, the weaker self, the one that delayed, doubted, complained, loses ground. Until one day you catch your reflection and realize something important. You didn't just become disciplined, you became dangerous. Not because you control others, but because you finally control yourself. That's what unsettles people. You don't ask for motivation, you don't stall with emotional explanations. You move, you say nothing, but your consistency speaks louder than words. You don't need sympathy, you need direction. You don't wait to feel ready, you act until readiness no longer matters. That's the path, that's the process. And after you've lived it long enough, you won't remember the last time you asked whether you felt like it, because that question no longer belongs to you. The version of you that hesitated, explained, needed convincing is gone. In its place stands someone who doesn't waver, doesn't ask, doesn't need, just moves, just acts, just becomes. There was a time you shared every decision, every goal, every plan. You talked about the schedule, the early mornings, the diet, the grind. You believed that if you said it out loud, if enough people knew, the pressure would force you to follow through. But it never did. Because talking gave you the feeling of progress without the cost of discipline. Over time, you learned a truth most people never hear. When you speak too soon, you waste the fire. You release the pressure before it turns into power. Real change doesn't need an audience, it needs silence. Not because you're hiding, but because you're finally grounded in your discipline. You don't have to explain the work. When you become the work, everything shifts. Silence becomes your armor, not because it shields you from others, but because it protects your focus from their noise. The moment you stop sharing everything is the moment you stop seeking approval. And when the need for validation disappears, something rare takes its place. Presence. Some people will say you've become distant, cold, detached. What they're really sensing is your stillness, and stillness unsettles the chaotic. Most people don't know how to exist without noise. They panic in quiet. They crave feedback just to feel alive. Discipline doesn't seek attention, it becomes attention. You enter a room without a word, and something changes. Not because you demand respect, but because your silence demands self-respect. It's in your eyes, in the way you no longer explain, in the way your actions arrive without warning and can't be reversed. You've become unreadable, and what people can't read, they fear. At first, that silence feels uncomfortable, like you're holding something back. Then it becomes peace. You realize how much energy you wasted narrating your journey to people who were never walking beside you. People who didn't carry your ambition but felt entitled to judge it, so you let it go. You stop trying to make others comfortable with your growth. In that quiet, you grow faster and deeper. No interruptions, no reactions, no borrowed limitations placed on your work. Just you, the path, and the sound of your own breath. You hear yourself think. More importantly, you hear yourself believe. That voice was always there, drowned out by applause and commentary. Now it's clear, now it leads. The Stoics understood the value of stillness. Marcus Aurelius warned that the more we value what lies outside our control, the less control we truly have. When you constantly talk about what you plan to do, you hand your power away to opinions, to approval, to praise. Silence pulls that energy back. It gathers it, compresses it, sharpens it. So when you act, when you execute, it isn't hesitant. It isn't diluted by the need to be understood. It's direct, clean, heavy. That weight only comes from work done alone, in private, in quiet. You don't need an audience to become excellent. You only need to decide that attention isn't the goal. Mastery is. That's the paradox. The less you speak, the more people wonder. The less you share, the more they speculate. Silence creates mystery, and mystery holds power. But you're not silent to manipulate. You're silent because you're working, because the process demands it, because explaining every step steals focus from the next one. While others talk about the life they want, you build its foundation, quietly, relentlessly, without spectacle. That's the difference between movement and momentum. Movement is noisy and chaotic. Momentum is silent. It builds beneath the surface until one day it breaks through. And when it does, it can't be ignored. People may call you distant. They may say you've become cold. Let them. They don't understand that solitude was required, that to hear your own values clearly, you had to mute theirs. That to walk your own path, you had to step away from paths that weren't meant for you. They mistake silence for disconnection, but silence is connection, just not to them. It's connection to something deeper, something that lasts. Seneca once said, "You should associate with those who improve you." And when no one around you meets that standard, silence becomes your shield. It becomes the protected space where discipline grows untouched by mediocrity. Over time, silence becomes your signature. You stop explaining your habits, your schedule, your standards. People don't need explanations anymore. They notice. You pass by, and they feel the weight of your choices without a word spoken. Results speak. Discipline always leaves evidence. It writes its own story without promotion, without noise. And if you stay committed long enough, that story begins to speak for you. No posts, no announcements, just presence, just execution, just the calm certainty of knowing who you are. That's when silence stops being absence and becomes focus. Not retreat, but preparation. You haven't disappeared. You've realigned. Every hour now carries weight. Every day serves the mission. And because you no longer seek applause, you no longer fear being overlooked. You traded visibility for vision, and that exchange always pays more than popularity ever could. Discipline doesn't ask to be recognized. It earns respect slowly, quietly, and when it finally arrives, it doesn't beg for attention. It commands it. You still feel everything. That's what most people get wrong. They think discipline means numbness, disconnection, emotional shutdown. It doesn't. The disciplined person feels pressure, doubt, exhaustion just as deeply as anyone else. The difference is simple. They don't obey it. Emotions show up uninvited. They knock, they argue, they plead, but they don't drive. You can't eliminate emotion, and you shouldn't try. You can only put it where it belongs. Like wind against a ship, uncontrolled, it pushes you off course. Managed, it can even move you forward. Control isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about choosing your response. Think about how many decisions you've made just to feel different. How often you skipped the workout because comfort felt easier. How many tasks you delayed because boredom whispered later. How many goals you paused because fear asked, "What if this fails?" Emotions are convincing. They sound logical even when they aren't. And if your mind hasn't been trained to pause, to evaluate, to hold the line, you'll follow them every time. The disciplined person still hears those voices, but they've built another one, a steady one. It doesn't argue. It doesn't panic. It simply says, proceed. Not because the emotion isn't real, but because it doesn't have authority. You'll feel the urge to stop when progress isn't visible. You'll want distraction when focus begins to hurt. You'll crave something easier when the road feels lonely. That's not a flaw. That's the system working. You're not being trained to avoid emotion. You're being trained to move through it. Discipline exposes patterns that once controlled you unconsciously. It brings light where reactions used to rule in the dark. It doesn't suppress, it reveals. You can acknowledge the storm without stepping into it. You can hear the thunder and still move forward. That's discipline, not the absence of difficulty, but the refusal to let it decide your actions. Emotional weather always changes. One day confidence feels effortless. The next day quitting feels reasonable. The disciplined understand the truth. Feelings aren't facts, they're information. You acknowledge them, then you decide. The goal stays. The schedule stays. The commitment doesn't pause because mood dipped. This isn't cruelty toward yourself, it's honesty. Too many people confuse kindness with indulgence. They believe listening to every emotion is self-care. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes self-care is structure. Sometimes it's saying, we keep going, because you've felt both sides, the pride of following through and the regret of choosing comfort. That contrast teaches more than any lesson ever could. Authority over emotion doesn't come from silence. It comes from consistency, from showing up anyway, from doing what must be done, especially when it feels hardest. The more you train this way, the quieter the chaos becomes, not because it disappears, but because your relationship to it changes. Doubt shows up, you breathe, frustration hits, you adjust. You've built a mind that holds the line, a mind that's steady, alert, unbending, rare. Most people fold at the first discomfort and call it intuition. The disciplined know better. They know intuition is refined through action, not mood. Not every discomfort is a warning. Sometimes it's resistance before growth. When emotions become background noise instead of commands, you become efficient, focused, difficult to derail. That's when people start asking how you stay so consistent, so stable, so unaffected. They don't see the work beneath it, the mental reps, the moments you didn't react, the nights you were exhausted and still followed through. They only see the surface. But underneath is a mind trained to act from clarity, not emotion. Aristotle believed excellence isn't a single act, but a habit. And that habit isn't formed when everything feels easy. It's forged when everything inside you says stop, and you don't. When you train yourself that way long enough, something shifts. You don't just gain discipline, you gain peace, because nothing inside you is fighting anymore. The emotions are still there, but they're quieter. They're no longer pulling you in every direction. They've been acknowledged, then calmly overruled through consistency, and that calm is what unsettles people. When you can't be easily swayed, you become rare. And rarity carries power. Not power over the world, but power over yourself. You don't need to shock anyone to be strong. You don't need reinvention every month or dramatic changes to stay relevant. You only need to become someone whose word, especially to yourself, is law. Predictability sounds boring to most people. They confuse it with stagnation. But there's another kind of predictability, the kind that doesn't bend when conditions change, the kind that doesn't ask how hard the day will be before deciding how much effort to give. The kind rooted so deeply in consistent action that it looks unshakable from the outside. That's the predictability that makes people uncomfortable. Because when you act without needing a push, without praise, without perfect conditions, you break the pattern they've grown used to, from others and from themselves. There's something quietly intense about a person who does what they said they would, even when no one is watching. It doesn't demand attention, but it can't be ignored. Most people perform when the spotlight is on and stall when it fades. Their rhythm depends on reaction. Discipline removes that dependency. Your rhythm stays the same. It doesn't shift with mood or convenience. You become dependable. And without ever raising your voice, you begin to lead, because people sense in you what they haven't built in themselves. When you become predictable to yourself, you stop breaking promises in private. You stop waking up wondering if today will be different. You stop planning just to abandon everything the moment emotion interferes. Your days start to feel solid, grounded. Momentum builds, not because life is perfect, but because the decision is already made. When something is decided, energy isn't wasted convincing yourself. You move like gravity, like seasons, like something governed by law, not feeling. Carl Jung said you are what you do, not what you intend. The disciplined don't need to speak loudly. Their actions repeat long enough to form a pattern. That pattern becomes identity. That identity becomes power, not over people, but over uncertainty, hesitation, and emotional swings. When you act predictably because it's who you are now, life begins to change quietly. Brick by brick, you earn something that can't be faked, self-respect. And once you have that, it becomes your backbone. Setting goals is easy. Talking about ambition is easy. What's rare is someone building quietly every day. No applause, no immediate reward. Results months away. Repetition, boredom, silence. That person starts to move differently. They don't rush to prove themselves. They don't over-explain. They don't talk much about discipline because the evidence is everywhere. In their habits, their health, their tone, their ability to stay calm while others unravel. Control your daily actions long enough and eventually you control your life. Not everyone celebrates that. Some resist it, some mock it. Consistency reminds people where comfort has been leading them, but you're not trying to expose anyone. You're just following through again and again. Each day you need less permission, less motivation, less alignment from the outside world. You become your own authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should stop arguing about what a good person is and simply be one. That's the mindset that forms when your actions align with your values, whether anyone's watching or not. You're no longer chasing inspiration, you're building it through repetition, and because of that, you become reliable to others, but more importantly, to yourself. The doubt that once whispered, "Will I actually do it this time?" fades. The answer is already written into your system. Yes, not hope, not guesswork, fact. There's peace in that. Peace in knowing your behavior doesn't swing with moods, news, or opinions. Peace in having a structure stronger than circumstance. No matter what breaks around you, your process holds. That stability spreads. Your relationships shift. Your work sharpens. Your mind clears because you're no longer pulled in every direction. You have direction. And when chaos tries to break through, you don't panic. You pause, adjust, and return to the pattern that built you. That's discipline, a lifeline that doesn't waver when life does. You don't need to predict the future when you've made yourself predictable in the right way. You already know how you'll respond. That certainty isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It shows up in small choices, quiet mornings, repeated follow-through. Over time, those moments become your legacy. While the world chases what's new, exciting, and easy, you keep showing up, not fast, but relentless. And that's what makes you unstoppable. There's a shift when you stop needing to be understood. At first it feels like loss. You stop explaining your schedule, your standards, your choices. People pull back, they say you've changed. What they really mean is you've stopped making them comfortable. You're no longer chasing approval. You're building something meant to endure storms. And slowly, steadily, the weight you've been carrying for years lifts. Discipline and detachment move together. Because real discipline isn't just structure, it's the strength to walk alone, to choose a path with fewer eyes on it, less praise, less applause, more peace. At some point, you realized the attention you were chasing wasn't building you, it was draining you. It tied your identity to other people's reactions. When they applauded, you felt worthy. When they didn't, you doubted yourself. But the moment you detach, the moment you stop needing their approval before taking the next step, you become uncontrollable, unpredictable. You stop rising and falling with public opinion and start standing on private integrity. Carl Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. But to do that, you have to release the version of yourself that was shaped to be accepted, the version built around other people's comfort, the one that softened ambition to avoid being called too much. That version has to burn, and that burning is lonely. People drift away, conversations lose depth, familiar places start to feel unfamiliar. But that discomfort isn't a sign you're lost. It's proof you're no longer available for a life built on permission. Most people never reach this point. They stay tethered to performance, to being liked, to being agreeable, even if it costs them everything they could have become. You're different now. You've chosen discipline over distraction, silence over noise, purpose over popularity. That means you stop explaining every decision. You stop trying to make people understand your path. You move. And that kind of detachment is powerful because it says, I know who I am, I know what I'm building, and I don't need validation to make it real. Something strange happens at this level of discipline. The more focused you become, the more misunderstood you are. Stillness gets mistaken for coldness. Focus gets labeled arrogance. Distance gets confused with superiority. But you're not above anyone. You're just no longer available for anything that pulls you off mission. Your time has weight now. Your boundaries are real. Your energy is earned. Not everyone can handle that shift. But you didn't build this life to be understood. You built it to be lived. Seneca said, if you live according to nature, you'll never be poor. But if you live according to others' opinions, you'll never be rich. The richest life isn't filled with followers or praise. It's a life with space, a life lived deliberately, anchored in values, not dragged by someone else's expectations. When you detach from approval, you stop begging for attention. You stop shrinking to stay acceptable. You grow, not for applause, but because growth is who you are now. Detachment isn't cold. It isn't emotionless. It isn't selfish. It's focused, it's clear, it's built on an internal compass that doesn't spin every time someone has an opinion. That clarity feels unfamiliar at first because it's rare, but inside it, there's peace. You stop reacting to everyone else's version of your life and finally live your own. You see how much of your past was shaped by fear of being misunderstood, how often you said yes to avoid tension, how many times you betrayed your own standards just to keep the peace. But peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's alignment. Real alignment begins when you stop asking the world to clap for your progress and start showing up whether they notice or not, whether they agree or not, whether they stay or not. That's where power lives, in the quiet refusal to explain, in the decision to keep moving without checking who's coming with you. You will lose people. That's unavoidable. But what you gain, clarity, alignment, sovereignty, is worth everything left behind. When you detach from needing their understanding, support, or praise, you stop becoming a reflection of other people's fears. You become a mirror of their potential. Not everyone wants to see that, but you didn't come here to be soft. You came to build something real. You don't need to be liked to live well. You don't need to be followed to be effective. You need honesty, discipline, and freedom from the need to be received a certain way. You walk your path, not because it's celebrated, but because it's yours. In the end, the world doesn't remember those who blended in. It remembers those who stood firm in their truth while everything around them tried to bend them. And you'll sleep peacefully knowing you didn't bend. You built quietly, consistently, alone if necessary, never lost, only free. You're not exhausted because you're doing too much. You're exhausted because you've been living beneath your potential, and you know it. It's not the workload that drains you, it's compromise. Waking up with a plan and letting it dissolve before noon. Breaking your own word repeatedly. That's the kind of fatigue rest can't fix. Every time you lower your standards to make things easier, you lose strength, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. Eventually, you start believing you can't hold yourself to anything higher. That belief becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes your life. Low standards are deceptively heavy. They feel light in the moment because they allow shortcuts and excuses. But over time, they cost more than they promise. They trap you in cycles of relief followed by regret, guilt, motivation, burnout, over and over again. Stability never arrives, not because you can't do more, but because you accepted less as normal, less effort, less structure, less clarity. That acceptance dulls your edge until you forget what sharpness felt like. Most people stay tired because they keep making exceptions. They treat standards like goals instead of baselines, optional, conditional. But real discipline isn't a burst of inspiration. It's a floor you refuse to fall below. Even on your worst day, you don't disappear. You still show up, you still move, you still execute, not perfectly but consistently. And that consistency builds something motivation never can: self-trust. Raising your standards isn't punishment, it's freedom. Low standards force constant negotiation. High standards create peace. They eliminate debate. They build rhythm and stability. You stop wasting energy deciding whether you'll train, focus, or show up. You do it because it's who you are now. Jung said the most terrifying thing is accepting yourself completely. That includes the part of you that coasted, the part afraid of demanding more. Raising standards forces you to face the version of yourself that settled, broke promises quietly, and called discipline too much. Letting go of that version is uncomfortable. It means stepping into someone you haven't fully met yet, sharper, more intentional, more exacting with effort, focus, and time. That's exactly why most people avoid it. Because raising your standards isn't just a mindset shift. It's a direct war with your comfort zone. It's refusing to let past versions of yourself dictate where you're allowed to go next. It's the decision to say, I don't care how I've lived until now, this is where the line is drawn. And once that line exists, everything begins to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself under pressure, you reinforce a new identity. The identity of someone who finishes what they start, who doesn't collapse under discomfort, who moves with intention even when no one is watching. Over time, that identity becomes so solid you stop recognizing the old version of you, the one who needed 5 alarms, the one who let one bad morning ruin the entire day, the one who blamed circumstances instead of adapting to them. That version doesn't disappear through force, it fades through standards. When the floor rises, weak habits can't survive. They can't breathe in the new environment. They either adapt or they dissolve. And what remains is someone who moves with quiet certainty, a calm that doesn't need to announce itself. Seneca once wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." You raise your standards not because you've mastered the next level, but because you're ready to outgrow the current one. Yes, it will feel like pressure. Yes, it will feel like friction. But pressure is how strength is formed. Friction is how the rough edges are smoothed. You don't rise by waiting for ease. You rise by raising what you're willing to accept. You're not demanding perfection. You're anchoring yourself in effort, in refusal, in the discipline of becoming someone you respect. Because if you don't respect your own effort, No amount of external success will ever feel real. It will always feel borrowed. And borrowed confidence always fades. Discipline isn't a punishment for who you are. It's the structure that allows you to become who you're capable of being. When standards are low, you trip over your own potential. You drown in shallow routines. But when the bar is high, you rise to meet it. Not all at once, but day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment, until one day you realize it isn't hard anymore. It's just who you are. Respect is often misunderstood. We're taught to aim it outward, toward authority, tradition, expectations. But the kind of respect that changes your life starts privately. It begins with how you treat yourself when no one is watching. Every time you hit snooze, skip the workout, cut corners, or break a promise to yourself, something deeper erodes. Not productivity, trust. Trust in yourself. And when that's gone, it doesn't matter how confident you appear, you'll always know you've been negotiating with your own potential. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about self-honor. It's about proving to yourself that your effort matters, that your time has value, that your goals deserve follow-through even when motivation is absent. The people who show up consistently, quietly, even when it's boring, aren't superhuman. They've simply decided, I matter enough to take myself seriously. Once that standard is set, behavior follows. Excuses fade, explanations disappear. You just do the work, calmly, deliberately, because it's no longer optional. That's the shift most people never make. They treat goals like ideas, not obligations. Flexible, optional, maybe someday. But when you treat your focus like gold and your time like something sacred, something changes. You walk differently, you speak less, but everything you do carries weight. Not because you're loud, but because consistency creates gravity, presence, and presence is rare. Discipline creates space, not just in your schedule, but in your mind. It clears uncertainty, cuts through distraction. It aligns you with time instead of putting you at war with it. You stop letting days slip through your fingers. You grip them, you use them, and you begin to respect the person in the mirror. Not because you've arrived, but because you've stopped running from your standards. You stop waiting for permission, stop waiting to be saved. You become the person you once hoped would show up and guide you. You become your own example. And in doing so, you earn something money can't buy. Self-respect. The quiet confidence of not needing to explain yourself. You live it. That's why discipline isn't just grinding, it's alignment, making actions match values. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's self-respect, not setting goals, but living like they already define you. Closing the gap between what you say you want and how you show up. And as that gap shrinks, peace grows. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop living out of sync with yourself. Over time, others feel that alignment. You don't announce progress. Your presence speaks. Your energy shifts. People adjust. Not because you're intimidating, but because you're solid, stable, grounded. In a distracted world, stability is power. You don't demand respect. You command it through consistency. Seneca also said, "He who is brave is free." Discipline is an act of bravery, choosing long-term value over short-term escape, doing the hard thing repeatedly until it becomes natural. And when that happens, freedom appears. Not because life becomes easy, but because your word becomes reliable. You say it, you do it. That reliability becomes your identity. You'll still face resistance. Off days will come, but you won't quit because the standard is set. You've built something stronger than mood or circumstance. Integrity, respect, And every time you live by it, you teach the world how to treat you, not through noise, but through discipline. In the end, discipline isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest, acting like your future matters, like your choices echo beyond the moment. At first, it feels mechanical. You move even when it feels unnatural. The old voice will resist. It will tempt you with comfort and delay. But every time you refuse to listen, something shifts, something cracks. That voice starts to weaken because it's no longer being fed. The reactive part of you, the one ruled by mood and emotion, begins to lose its grip. In its place, something colder, calmer, more focused starts to form. Not because you tried to become someone new, but because you repeated the right actions enough times for them to become who you are. Repetition strips you down. It exposes the stories you've told yourself about your limits, your worth, how much discomfort you can handle. It forces truth, not in moments of inspiration, but in moments where quitting feels easier and you still don't. That is the death of the fragile self. The one that stopped when it got tired. The one that needed approval before moving. The one that believed motivation had to come first. That version can't survive repetition because repetition demands something higher. It demands consistency without applause, without mood, without recognition. It demands that you show up anyway. Carl Jung once said, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." Repetition is that choice, not made once, but made again and again, until it burns through the parts of you that used to fold. It isn't glamorous. Most days it doesn't feel good, but it works because repetition isn't about performance. It's about programming. Every repeated action is a vote, and the more you vote, the clearer your identity becomes. You stop trying to be disciplined. You start being it, quietly, without reward, just forward. And something strange happens. The path that once felt heavy becomes familiar. The routine that once felt like sacrifice begins to feel like stability. You stop craving excitement. You start craving peace. The peace that comes when actions and values finally align. That alignment isn't accidental. It's earned through deliberate repetition, through choosing discomfort so often it becomes normal. That's when people notice, even if they can't explain it. They feel it in how you move, how you carry yourself, how calm you are. You no longer talk about discipline because you've become it. Your habits speak, your choices speak, your silence speaks. You're no longer pulled by chaos or temptation because repetition has hardened your edges, not in a way that makes you cold, but in a way that makes you immovable. Plato said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Every repeated action is a small conquest, a reclaiming of your mind, your attention, your time. You don't always feel stronger, but you are. Every time you do what needs to be done, especially when it's boring or thankless, you build something that can't be taken from you. While most people live reactively, waiting for the right feeling, you choose to live deliberately, and that decision, repeated enough times, becomes destiny. Repetition doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter you. It simply reflects who you are through what you consistently do. If you don't like the reflection, you change the routine. You start smaller if needed, but you don't stop. Because every repetition isn't just a step forward. It's a blade carving away who you're not, a hammer forging who you are. That's what discipline really is. Not pressure, not perfection, precision. The slow replacement of weakness with strength, chaos with order, reaction with control. You begin to see time differently. You stop rushing. You stop procrastinating. You understand that success doesn't come from massive effort once, but from small things done well again and again until they compound. Transformation isn't sudden. It's gradual, invisible at first, but it's happening. One day you wake up and realize you're no longer hoping to become disciplined. you already are. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Repetition protects you from that waste. It saves you from constantly starting over. Every stop costs momentum. Every repetition, even imperfect, builds it. And over time, that momentum becomes a force no one sees coming. When the disciplined version of you finally emerges, it doesn't look dramatic. It looks grounded, reliable, solid. You move with purpose. You speak less, but your words carry weight because the work is already done behind them. You've earned your own respect. And once you have that, everything else follows. Discipline isn't built in one day. It's built every day. In every choice that says, "I'll do it again," even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Repetition doesn't just change habits, it changes identity. And when identity changes, everything changes with it. The old you fades, the one who hesitated, who waited to feel ready, who always found an excuse. What remains is someone who moves forward, who shows up, who does the work, who doesn't stop. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you've become. The disciplined version of you isn't a dream. It's a decision made in silence, forged through repetition and lived without apology. You don't need more time. You need more truth. Take one more step, then another, until you no longer recognize the person who used to wait.